Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, Coding Across the Grades. We are excited to do this webinar just because it's a great topic to cover, but also we get to celebrate Coding Week or Hour of Code Week. So we're glad to be able to put a spotlight on this really important topic, and we've got all of you covered no matter what grade level you are working with. We've got you covered with our presenters today, and we will get started in just a few minutes, but I want to do just a few housekeeping things first. Hopefully you all have seen the chat box over on the right side of your screen. Please use that to make comments, ask questions, share ideas throughout the call, just as a conversation piece, not just ask questions. But you all know great things or are doing great things, so please share those or ask questions not only of the presenters but maybe of the other participants in the call today. You guys are a great network, so utilize each other. And if you haven't introduced yourself in the chat box, that would be a really great thing to do. And Marcus mentioned sharing your Twitter handle. If you are connected on Twitter, definitely share that, and others on the call can add you to their network, and when you're doing that, you can use that eLearn hashtag also to connect to each other, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a little bit. When you do use that chat box, please make sure that you have selected everyone from the Send To dropdown. It defaults to just send messages to me, and we would like everybody who's on the call to be able to see your questions and your the comments that you have to make today. I have muted all of the lines except for our presenters. Please keep your line muted throughout the call. That will decrease background noise. There's always something that happens that you don't expect it to happen. Somebody comes into the room or the PA system goes off. So just keep your line muted and use the chat box for your questions. That's all of my housekeeping things. So on to some other professional development opportunities that we have. This webinar is part of our eLearning Lab series, and we will be at, this is our last webinar for this semester, but we will be having more webinars next semester, and so be watching out for those topics coming out soon. Also, if there's a topic that you would like to see us cover, please let me know, or if there's something that you would like to share. We are always looking for topics and presenters, so you can always reach out to me on that. And Twitter, as I mentioned just a little bit ago, please be using that eLearn hashtag. That connects you to a network of thousands of educators, not only in Indiana, but outside of Indiana and even the country. We've got a lot of people connecting that way. So your network is huge if you use that hashtag. And along with that hashtag are our weekly Twitter chats. Those happen Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern. This week's topic is using cameras for coaching with Pam Oriski, and that's part of our, I guess this would be the first Thursday. Is that right? The coaching week of the topics. So join us, join that Twitter chat this Thursday if that sounds like a topic that you're interested in. The next piece of our professional development, the opportunities that we have are our book clubs, and we just finished a book club about 2 weeks ago, but we will be having another one coming up this, I call it winter because it starts in the winter and then it kind of ends in around spring break. So we will be starting on February 5th. We're going to be reading Social Media by Jennifer Casa-Todd, and we're really excited to continue another important conversation on digital citizenship, and as she puts it, digital leadership. So really focusing on getting our students to be digital leaders with all of the social media that they have access to. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, please visit the eLearning book club website that I've listed there, and you can get more information and register for that to get a reminder coming up in the after the first of the year when we get started with that. And I think that takes us to our topic at hand. And just to remind everybody, make sure that you choose everyone from the Send To drop-down so that we all get your comments. But I'm going to turn it over to our presenters for today. We've got Marcus Painter from Russville, Maria Sellers from South Vermilion, and Brandy Hicks from Milan. And as I said, we've got the grade levels covered, so we're going to be starting with Marcus at the elementary level, moving to Maria at the middle school, and then Brandy at the secondary. So I am going to turn the mic over to Marcus.
Hello.
I hear you now.
All right. Sorry for the delay. I had to take a quick selfie. I'm here all week, folks. All right.
Thanks, Marcus.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about littles doing big things. And I want to start by just sort of saying that this is just sort of kind of a case study, really. I've been in this position as the library and instructional tech coach here for my corporation. This is almost halfway through the second year. Before that, I taught secondary English for 17 years. So we're in the beginning stages of sort of a corporation vision when it comes to coding, and this is just kind of how things have gone the last couple of years. Next. So Rossville Consolidated School District, about 20 minutes east of Lafayette, to give you kind of an idea if you've not heard of us, some basic information there. Again, I kind of threw the thing out about Twitter. That's probably my ideal PD right there, so feel free to follow myself, and I will certainly be looking through and scouring to do the same. Next. All right, so to give you some background, I know that one of the things that I was concerned about with coding is sort of the unknown. So to give you an idea of what we are and what we're doing, and so you can kind of equate it to your own situations. We're a rural school corporation. The entire corporation is just one building. So right there, a lot of you guys are sitting in your classrooms or in your offices, and my entire corporation is under one roof. We've got about 1,000 kids, about 90 staff members, and this year is the first year we've been one-to-one with Chromebooks in K through 12, every class. In past years, we had laptops and sort of a hybrid environment with Chromebooks, laptops, and some iPads floating around. Now that we're sort of streamlined, all Chromebooks, things are much, much easier in terms of facilitating things like coding. Next. So coding is today's language of creativity. All our children deserve a chance to become creators instead of consumers of computer science. And for my money, that goes beyond computer science, but the topic here, obviously, that's what we're focused on. I love the quote. I love the idea of just creation over consuming, because I think that's where we need to be headed in education, not just simply with coding, but across the board. So I think that that's something to kind of keep in mind. I'm sure some really intelligent person told me this or said it when I was paying attention, but we always ask kids, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? I think coding is an avenue to teach kids that we as adults need to ask a different question. We need to ask not what do you want to do when you grow up, but what problem do you want to solve? The word problem makes it sound urgent. And when we say when you grow up, it suggests they can't do it now.
You got another charger.
And So the idea that a kid can code today in a 4th grade classroom and do something great, I think they need to understand that, and that's why I think that quote's important. Next. So our approach here, I tried to kind of break it down into some steps. I think ultimately what I'm going to be talking about here is probably just peace of mind for those of you that are already coding in elementary grades. If you're considering it, consider this sort of a troubleshooting session. Take the good, take the bad, learn from our experiences, and use that to your advantage as you begin the process. So when I started here, the first step that I and the corporation had was we just need to get our kids device savvy. And so the solution, again, small corporation, we weren't able to hire a tech coach or an e-learning coach for the elementary grades. So I'm the coach for K through 12. And so in lieu of that, the solution at the time before I got here was simply to have the specials teachers teach technology on Fridays. And it is as complicated and convoluted as it might sound. So our choir, our music, our PE, our library assistant, and our art teachers in the elementary side, they teach technology on Fridays. So all of those K through 5 kids get tech on Friday. And it's taught by those specials teachers, which meant that we had to do a lot of work to coach up those teachers so that they could feel confident enough to sort of take those steps and become the authorities on the topic. So we designed curriculum, basics of Chromebooks and usage, navigation, Google Apps for Education, and then, of course, typing, which is super duper important. And I put the little logo there for Nitro Type. We use like type.com for the early grades just to get used to learning home row and things of that nature. But Nitro Type, if you haven't seen this, it's pretty great. When you get your kids, once they are able to type and they're familiar with all the keystrokes, get them on Nitro Type. It's super fun. It's gamifying of typing, and it's competitive, and the kids just go bonkers for it. So if you're not using that, you might suggest that somewhere along the line. Step 2, we were wanting to get deeper into coding in our 1st through 5th grades. And one of the things that I am really kind of digging a lot is how our specials teachers are using some non-tech coding activities, like binary bracelets, and just focusing on process thinking and following of directions, and then bouncing back and forth between non-tech and tech coding exercises. I think that it's helping our littles understand that the coding on the computer isn't necessarily this fun little visit, which it often is, but I think it's helping them to bounce back and forth between tech and non-tech. They haven't done much of that this year. We're using Hour of Code as sort of the launch of that, and so there's going to be a lot more coding going on in those Fridays during 2nd semester. Step 3, this was kind of the big leap. If we're wanting to innovate, we want our kids to innovate, we've got to be able to gamble. And so the gamble was simple. I came across Google CS First this summer, and I begged elementary teachers, and I convinced, there was no payment, but I convinced a couple of teachers, a 4th and a 5th grade teacher in my building, to sort of use Google CS First. It is designed as a club, meaning, additional to class time, outside of class time. That wasn't good enough for me. I wanted to have a guaranteed sample size. I wanted to have a guarantee that the kids that started the program were going to finish the program, and that attendance wasn't going to be an issue or anything like that. So I begged and I convinced 2 teachers to begin the club within their classes, which was a big step. So I initiated the setup, the organization, theme selection, and they are now doing that in their courses, and it's not easy. Next. So we're about halfway through the Google CS First sort of guinea pig experiment here. So, you know, what can we improve? Next. So from my teachers, my 4th and 5th grade teachers, these are innovative, energetic teachers. These are your teacher leaders. I kind of knew that I would get, you know, I knew these individuals would be game for this. They love the content available through the Google CS First clubs. And obviously, as you can imagine, they really do like the level of engagement that they see with their kids. The good thing is that the teachers, if you're thinking about using this club in your building in a course or as an actual club, teachers are hesitant because if they don't know about coding, if they don't have the answers. And that's the great thing about the CS First setup, is that it's all student driven, and the teacher really kind of just sets up what needs to happen, and you don't need to have all the answers, and that's what's great about it. In fact, it works better that way because the kids have to. The onus, if you will, is on the student to figure out and problem solve, and that's the whole point of coding. Don't be, you know, if you're trying to recruit teacher leaders, always remind them, like, you don't have to know anything about coding to sort of facilitate this. The content in Google CS First is great. I think it's enriching, it's interesting, it's fun for the kids, and it's age level appropriate, meaning that their basic courses are going to be doable in the elementary levels, and as you progress up the courses, you're going to progress in difficulty. Our main obstacle I hinted at before, we jumped in with both feet. Hey, we're going to do this in class so that we have a really true, good sample size. And it's not going to fluctuate. And so we're going to see what happens. We're going to see how things progress throughout the course of the year, and then we'll adjust from there. The adjustments that I'm already thinking about, yes, you know, it's designed as an extracurricular club, so use it that way. If that's something that you can get teacher leaders to buy into, meaning they're going to stay after school or come in early to work with kids in this, and the students are going to, you know, maybe fluctuate and maybe be there sometimes and not other times, or just you just are going to guarantee your audience. If it's a club, it's voluntary, then you are assuming that those students are all in and interested. I think in our situation, it would be possible to rearrange our schedule a bit on our Fridays, our Tech Fridays. We could do some rearranging in the future so that we really were able to do more of the Google CS First content with those elementary grades, 4th, 5th graders in particular. So we could do some scheduling adjustments to provide more time. That would be possible. Next. So students, you know, coding is not this magical sort of fix everything tool. It's like everything else in education, in my opinion, where you are going to be engaging certain students and maybe not so much others. But one of our biggest and most important tasks as educators is differentiation. And that continues to be the case, and as long as I've been doing it, it's always been the case. So I like that this is another tool in the tool belt. This is another thing that a teacher, a corporation can utilize to engage learners, to provide them with future-ready skills. Students, for the most part, you know, if I'm interviewing or I'm sort of picking brains, I do hear a lot of the F word. They do seem to have fun, most, not all, but most. They are engaged during those times on those Fridays, and sometimes it's hard to keep a 4th grader engaged on a Friday, but coding has proved to be a good vehicle for that. There are going to be reluctant learners, but again, we're going to be able to use coding to sort of find those reluctant learners, find those gamer kids who maybe don't want to do any of the math, don't want to study their spelling words, but if they are all in on on doing the coding and they really enjoy that, maybe you get a little bit more buy-in when it comes time to study times tables. And the number one complaint that I've heard from the students that are using Google CS First is they just think it takes too long. You know, most of those units are roughly an hour. You're seeing this if you're doing an hour of code. You know, an hour is a lot of time in a given school day. So they do complain, oh, it takes too long, it takes forever. That's just, I think, probably par for the course and probably would be the case with a lot of different other activities. Next. So if I was going to give advice, use your teacher leaders. I wouldn't suggest a coach or a principal or a department chair just decide to take this on and do everything. I would say, you know, find your teacher leaders, find your innovators in your buildings, find those people who are willing to take a chance, even if it means that they're just going to get that one reluctant learner. Let those people take the lead and facilitate, and then you can be there to be available and be supportive. This is where coaching comes into play, those of us in the room that are coaches in some, you know, fashion. Lots of pep talks. Yes, I know it's a long time, you know, trying to support and be helpful. Talk to the kids. I try to get down there when I know that the classes are going to be working on Google CS First. I get down there and just kind of watch, ask kids what it is that they're doing, explain why you did blank. And I think they feel very sort of adult in those times where I'm sitting there sort of talking to them about what they're creating. Be structured and intentional about teaching and being process-minded because we want our kids to be problem solvers, not just doers. And that goes education-wide, but I think, again, coding is that vehicle, and it's just a really efficient tool to use. Next. That's pretty much it. I tried to, my alarm just went off, so in the range. So again, if you want to give me a follow, again, you're more than welcome to email me if after this you have some more specific questions. By all means, don't hesitate to email me there, and I'm happy to collaborate and talk about what we're doing in our classrooms to make our kids ready for future careers. So that's about it from me. I think we're going back to Mary.
Thanks so much, Marcus, for some great information for elementary, using that as the idea. And now let's move on to Maria Sellers with some middle school thoughts.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I'm at South Vermillion Middle School, way over almost in Illinois and central Indiana. We're a pretty small school corporation, rural, but around some bigger schools. And so for us this year, this is the first year that we're officially bringing coding into the curriculum and so that students do get it throughout their actual school day. So what we've done, if you could go to the next slide, I've actually switched from an e-learning coach position to being a GAIN teacher. And a lot of people will ask, what in the world is a GAIN class? And the big thing for us was getting students the digital citizenship that they needed, the digital literacy, college, career, business, IT, all of those huge things that are important. And that's where the coding fell into play. Next slide, please. And of course, we've made it a pretty big deal for us that this was a big step. So if you go to the next one, I'll explain a little bit more about how the GAIN actually works. So each student in each grade level, they have the option to take band or music at some band or choir, I should say. And if they take band or choir, then they do not get to be in, I think, the industrial arts, art, and another course. But being that this was such a big deal, they actually lumped GAIN with health and PE. So each student at South Vermillion Middle School will be in GAIN for 12 weeks. It doesn't sound like a lot, but we make it work. So what I've done, I've dedicated 2.5 to 3 weeks to just coding and computer science. So the goal is to not just give them a brush through Hour of Code once a year, but to actually give them some intensive work with the computer science standards. We'll go to the next one. Thank you. So the first goal when the students walk in is to break down those assumptions and that stereotype that only nerds code and that I'm not smart enough to code. A lot of kids don't think coding is fun. So we tried to break that away. And the biggest one, especially when we would do the Hour of Code in elementary, just for that hour, they say, I'd rather play the video game. So getting them the awareness that the video game creator actually does make more money in the end than the video game player was a big game changer. And that's where I got a lot of my young gentlemen on board. So getting them to know you can code, it's okay, it's not a stereotype, was a really big step. Next slide, please. So we tried to do a progressive build, but keeping in mind this year that everyone's 6 through 8 is basically on the same playing field unless they've done coding outside of school with 4-H or on their own. We decided to just build as we went in the hopes that in the future this would work. So we're just using code.org this year and then Spiro EDU, mostly with 6th and 7th, and then we build further with 8th. So I was able over the summer through Joink, because they were bringing the Joink service into our area and into our schools, I wrote a grant and they gave us 30 Spiros. So that gave me something to actually code with. I can do all the coding with kids, but if they're not influencing something or making something happen, they didn't seem to be on board. So that was a big help, hence the reason we're involving Spiro so much in the curriculum. So as you can see, there's a pretty good progression, and I'll break it down for you here in a second. So let's try the next slide, please. So I just started teaching 6th grade a week and a half ago. I can tell you what my dream is, but I don't have a lot on the coding. We start that next week. I got rather close to Computer Science Week, but not close enough. So this week we did the Google coding activity. We actually did that yesterday, and they went completely nuts, which made me extremely happy. So we all went to google.com, clicked play, and off they went, and we could talk about event and loop and doing some things. So it was super exciting. It let me get them started. So I'm hoping next week when we do this, it's going to work out really well. So on the code.org, I'll always do the unplugged lessons inside the lesson. So with the 6th grade, we're going to do the Express course. And my vision is to start them and be together at least for a day or two, and then after that, let them go. Especially after doing the 7th grade and the code, which I'll talk about in a second. A lot of the students said that learning code at their own pace was a huge deal. And in fact a kid said, it wasn't just fun, it was incredible because I could try to stay ahead of my friends, which I would have never thought about that. And one of them said, you know, for the first time, because I could work at my own pace in this course, I actually felt smarter than all of my friends. Because coding actually came easy to him. So it was a really big deal to be able to let them go at their own pace through the code.org. You can do that, or you can keep them all together. I don't see a problem with either way. And then our next step, after they go through the code.org for a week and a half, is to do the Bridge Build STEM activity with Spiro. And at the end of my slides, I'll have a slide that maybe we can get to you. It actually has the link to that activity where the students have to use popsicle sticks and build a bridge and find out what speed do they have to take the Spiro, will the grade of the ramp actually work to get onto the bridge. So there are several things that they have to solve inside doing the coding. So again, they're doing something hands-on, not just sitting at the computer and coding. And that's a pretty big deal for middle school kids. They want to see something happen. Next slide, please. And then 7th grade, I just finished with them a week and a half ago. So I would like next year's step for 7th grade to be more intense because we've basically done what I proposed for 6th grade. So this may not be intensive enough for next year. I do need to go back and think that. But the 7th grade needed that foundation to get where we needed to go and get them caught up so that when they do go to high school, they are where they need to be. So this year we did manage to complete that express course that I proposed for 6th grade and then move on to the Spiro EDU app. And after some searching, I actually found a project online called Spiro Hero. It was designed by a student at Thomas Nelson High School in Kentucky. And if I read this right, they used it for the state robotics competition. And so we went ahead and used it, and it actually encompassed English, science, coding, and a lot of creativity. And so basically, if you go to the next slide, I'll show you some pictures. The students had to write a story. So they came up basically just with a story. And after they wrote the story, they had to then create a set. And I told them this could be simple, but as you can see, some of them went completely crazy, went down to the art teacher. I know one built a cave with some kind of weird clay material. We have a barn well painted. Some kids just used books in the class. But once they had their setting started and they had their story written, they had to code the Spiro to run this obstacles course, which was the setting of their story. And in the end, they had to hit play on the Spiro EDU app, and the Spiro went while they read the story. So the goal was to code your Spiro well enough that when you were done with the actual activity, the Spiro followed the course perfectly, it was in line with the story, and everything worked well. One thing I did not anticipate was how extensive these sets would be. Some of the students, as you can see, the boy in the middle with the stools, he actually started getting into some science and some Rube Goldberg machines. As he went through that first bench, he actually had a string that ran through, and if you hit the string just right, then the cage would fall down, nearly missing the Spiro, which would then continue on, hit something else, and the paper would fall. It was so complicated, but he actually finally got it to work in the end. So through coding, he actually built himself a nice STEM experience, which was incredible. If you look at the top, that group, it was really tough to motivate them, but when I told them they could be super duper creative and involve sets, they actually started coding, and when we moved away from coding, they were really mad at me, actually. But so a group of them are actually working in study hall, still coding and coming up with stories, which is really cool. That's not what I expected. And then the picture at the bottom with the beach ball, that group, I could not get motivated for anything, but when I handed them a box of tropical decorations and I said, be creative, they actually came up with a survivor game. So they had 2 Spiros running, which I would have never thought they would have coded up 2 Spiros, but they had 2 Spiros running through this course with the story. So something so simple turned into something absolutely crazy and took up a ton of our time. And I actually had to take a week away from something else in the curriculum so that this could be finished to fruition, which was really cool. Next slide, please. Awesome. And then 8th grade, I won't see them until the last 12 weeks. And so at this point, it's a bit scary. I feel like I have to see what happens with 6th grade and go back and consider what happened with 7th grade to determine 8th grade. But I really think they're going to have to go through some of the basics, but hopefully a little bit faster. So my goal is to get them through some of the code.org if we have to. So I'll probably do a pre-assessment and see where they stand. Go through the Spiro EDU. At this point, they've been asking, are we going to use it too? If I don't use the Spiro, I have a feeling they'll be a little bit jealous. So we'll have to see what we come up with them. I don't know about a project with the Spiro EDU just yet. So if you guys have ideas, I would love to hear from you. What can I do with them? What app should I use with them? But I know that based on skill, I want to make several tools available to them, whether they go to Codecademy. My kids who haven't done anything with code, I'd love to keep them on code.org. We have Swift Playgrounds available to us and about 6 Raspberry Pis that I could throw out there for students who are in need. So I'd like to make 8th grade more experience-based. Where are you, what do you need, and let them loose to learn in their way. Next slide, please. And then there's a whole other group of ICATs through the Hoosier Student Digital Leaders. I have ICATs at the high school and I have ICATs at the middle school. So they function completely separate of each other, but they do spend time being super duper creative. So right now, the ICATs, their responsibility really is to help me with iPad repairs, just basic things. My iPad won't charge, my email doesn't work anymore, things like that. But when there weren't customers in the room, I kind of noticed they started getting into doing a lot of coding. And I walked in one morning after a meeting and I had 12 ICATs standing in this room around a computer, and they had gotten themselves into Scratch and they had the makey connected, and then the next computer over, they were using Scratch trying to do something else. And then when I looked at the third computer, I had a group of kids, they had a Raspberry Pi set up, and they were researching how to build an arcade game with their old gaming system controllers at home. And so basically it turned into more of a makerspace, experience-based situation. So I think we're looking at, in the future, they're just going to be a digital makerspace setup in there. So with that in mind, I've now set them up in project teams. So I have 3 kids from each grade level that come during the morning time or during their study hall, and they're working together. My only stipulation is that they have to be coding on something to create their final project. And as you can see right now, they're really into Scratch. Some of them are Codemy, Khan Academy. I have a couple of them who are really comfortable and they're tackling Raspberry Pi projects. So giving that digital leadership situation some coding experience was a really big step for us. Next slide, please. So going beyond 2017, now that I'm in one building, I haven't known what that was like in a while. So we'll see what how this, but I'd like to possibly start something after school, maybe calling it More to Gain or some kind of creative name that goes beyond game, where I can bring in some community people to start clubs after school, where we would just have a coding club, maybe a skating club, a robotics club. I know that the high school is doing it combined with middle schoolers, and that has to be somewhat frustrating. So I'd like to have just a middle school focused robotics club, and then have a code studio where they just can play with all of the materials we have, Raspberry Pi, and hopefully some more things that I can get some Arduino, so that they can be in there creating what it is that they want to do. So it may be crazy, but we'll see what happens. Next slide, please. And so then one of our other ideas is to push the high ability students next year, building upon what they learn in my class. So by using time in study hall and time with the counselor and possibly myself, maybe initiating a Genius Hour that would be either code-driven, STEAM-focused, somehow enhancing what they learned in my class, and of course going above standards, whether they choose math science, computer science. So again, if anything you have to offer there, I would love to hear it. So that's another one of the big steps we're hoping to take next year. Next slide, please. Awesome. So as one of the assistant directors for our high school theater, I've had an awesome honor of working with all of the backstage students and the sound light booth students. Not something I would have expected, but it's been amazing. These students, I've noticed, the more I've observed them, constant problem solvers, and they have to be super fast. And during our last play, there was this weird thing going on backstage that the actors were stealing each other's earpieces, and then the earpieces were disappearing. So we are now short 8 earpieces, and they cost $75 each. And one of my Spotlight kids came to me right before one of the dress rehearsals and said, hey, last night I got on my computer and I was working on in my design, and I can't remember what he said he used. He actually designed himself the earpiece and then tried to 3D print it. And so we have been spending since that tech week until now dwindling down how can he make this happen. So the last time I checked, he's within, I think, 1.5 centimeters the width, getting it to fit around the ear and actually getting the microphone piece to fit in. So then that brought to mind, why not possibly start some kind of creators club as well, whether it be coding or doing design with a 3D printer. So we're trying to think of that Imagineering create. And I don't know if you guys have looked at, if you've ever seen Molly take out the trash, but if you haven't, check that out. It's an awesome video, just putting into perspective, you know, kids see a problem, so instead of complaining about it, how can we get them motivated to find a solution and push forward? Last slide, please. And so here's the slide with the takeaways. If they could get this to you, that would be great. So these are the links to the actual challenges. The bridge challenge is not mine, but the other two, I tried to make it very specific and tailor-made for our students. So if you have any more ideas, I greatly appreciate it since I'm super duper new in this situation in this class. So we'll turn it back over to Mary and we'll see where we go with high school.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Maria, for the middle school perspective. And now we'll move on to Brandy for the high school.
Greetings. So glad to be here. I am, this is Computer Science Week. I put in there from Milan Community School Corporation. And we are also a small rural school district, and we come from the area where the actual movie Hoosiers would have came from. So that is our kind of history of our little town. If you can think of the movie Hoosiers, you understand how small that actually is. Go ahead and click to next. So a little bit about me, Brandy Hicks, and I am the technology teacher specialist, kind of everything. I started here 4 years ago, actually 5 years ago, this will be the 5th year, and it was, they hired me to help them come into their one-to-one transition and journey. When I started, I was their coach, kind of tech lead for the school, and now I'm moving into also doing technology teaching, so it's kind of pretty exciting. I'm going to share our corporation's hour of code and computer science pathway. So I'm going to talk a little bit about high school, middle school, intermediate, and elementary. Next. So it all began 4 years ago before we started our one-to-one, and we decided that we would start with a student-led tech team. And the reason we started with a student-led tech team was because we're small, understaffed, and underfunded. So what did we have an abundance of? We had an abundance of students. So prior to beginning that one-to-one journey, we went through and selected students, and we selected some opportunities to train them, and we created a tech team. So we are in our 4th year this year, and we have about 20 students, and you can see them there, and they are encompassing into our Milan Student Digital Leaders. With that, everything that we've done has kind of been student-driven. That group of students wanted more. They wanted an opportunity to work in a computing field, and we did not have the capacity or the opportunities here, so we started creating opportunities. Next. So when we started out, they were just a help desk, kind of just helping that one-to-one transition. But those Tech Tribe members led into other opportunities. And as you can see here, they started by doing a coding club at the elementary. So we did coding in our group, but then we brought it into the elementary. So they were applying and actually teaching those coding opportunities. I heard CS First recommended earlier, and code.org. We've used both. at this time, we have our student high school techs. They do spotlight visits into the elementary classrooms, and they actually do basically, it's kind of like mini hours of code the entire week. It's kind of it's pretty cool. And then just this year, to add a little bit more excitement, our student techs are doing coding with robots. In the computer classes, we're really focusing on the littles, so that K through 2. Go ahead, next. Now, I threw this quote on here purposely. Every accomplishment starts with a decision to try. And as I mentioned, those students kind of drive everything that's occurring here. They wanted the computer science opportunities. One of my students, she had found a Girls Who Code club, and to be able to start that club, you needed to actually pass a test for programming, and I didn't have the background. So I got a local programmer that came in and was able to pass the test, and we started a Girls Who Code and got some opportunities to come into our school district. I'm going to pause for a moment because I have my Girls Who Code, a couple of them still here right now. And this is where our coding opportunities started. It all started with student-driven desires. So it's kind of pretty interesting. Next. So this is our Girls Who Code Club, and I'm going to have them say hello.
Hi.
And you are?
Haley.
Haley, great.
Oh, I'm a senior.
How long have you been in our tech tribe? They're also my tech tribe members and my Girls Who Code.
3 years.
3 years. And I also have?
Sarah.
Loud enough.
Sarah.
How long have you been a techie? 2 years, and she's a Girls Who Code member. And we also have our local kind of programmer that came in, passed the test, helped us learn a little bit about coding, and gave us some different opportunities. And that is, I'll have her in. Amy Bully, who is with us here today. So that's where it all started, our opportunity to move into more computer science. Next. With the Girls Who Code group, we decided this year that it's kind of project-based, that we wanted to imagine more. And as I mentioned, we are that small town. We don't have a lot of opportunities. They didn't have that computer science opportunities for them. They couldn't go to coding clubs or anything like that. It all had to be here. So how do we do that? Well, we are focusing on the virtual reality and the VR learning experiences. Next. Their project for their Girls Who Code, last year we looked at creating a website. This year we're going to create a VR experience. And our process, we're going to code a VR walking tour of Milan. Now, we haven't started it yet, but it's kind of exciting to think about them being able to relay the history of the town and doing it in a real-life application. And VR is pretty exciting. We are, just this week, we've got an Oculus Rift that we're demoing to see how do we bring that kind of opportunity into our school and education process to kind of get the computer science area on fire with what we can do. Next. So if you're interested in coding with VR, Code Spaces, which I put on here, is a free opportunity that you can go through. We're using this with our Girls Who Code, and we're learning the core 4 in computer science. What I realized was the Girls Who Code gave me some background information so that I was able to actually understand and start learning how coding works, because that's the deficit. Having a teacher in place in the small rural community that can teach middle and high school level computer science. It's it took me a while to find someone in the community to get our Girls Who Code running. So how do we get it embedded into our classroom so that we can have those opportunities? The elementary was easier because, as mentioned, you've got easier opportunities where anybody can kind of jump in and learn it, but when we're moving towards the higher levels, it becomes much more complex. So you go through your core 4, which is your variables, conditionals, loops, and functions. Next. Oh, I forgot to mention the last one. So we've invited a math teacher to attend our Girls Who Code because we're interested in seeing how the coding could work, the computer science could work along with our math programs that we're using. So here's kind of where we lay it all out, what we're doing in each of our schools, the elementary, the intermediate, and the high school. And I mentioned that it was difficult because we don't have that strong teacher base with a strong computer science background. So what do? Well, in the elementary, we have a computer teacher that's really gung-ho, and she's willing to try anything. So she does Hour of Code in her classroom. She's done code.org training, so she's doing some computer science activities in the unplugged different things. But my techies, my student techs, also go in there and work with them. So those are some things they're working with the elementary. The intermediate school and the middle school, we also do the Hour of Code. We just got and it's not quite a teacher yet, but she's an aide that has a tech class, and she took training through code.org, and she's doing some introduction to computer science course with some of the students, so that's new this year. It's pretty exciting. And then at the high school. At the high school, that's me, and I do not have that strong background, but it's coming, and we do the Hour of Code. We have guest speakers. We're networking with different colleges to find out what kind of levels do we need here in our district to get kids prepared for their future. Just this week, we have a guest speaker from Ivy Tech, Purdue, and VidCode. And in the high school, I'm teaching Introduction to Computer Science, which is the computer science discoveries through code.org. And we also have that tech team that's working with it, and then this year we're focusing with STEAM VR. Next. Okay, so I was telling all the different opportunities. So for the entire school district, we have promoted an entire Hour of Code, which encompasses they can do, we don't have a drop everything and do your Hour of Code or anything like that, but it has been activated and been passed out by all the teachers. We are one-to-one, so this was shared, and the students are aware that they're allowed to work on it, create games, different things, and different opportunities. So this is the format that we are using. Next. Okay. Okay, so back to my high school. So my high school students, this that first image there you're going to notice is that is the Oculus Rift. We test piloted it at the HEC conference, and we're looking at it. Now we have it demoed in our school right now, trying to see if this is something that we can integrate into our actual classes and such that it took now these are two of my tech students that are also into my Introduction to Computer Science. This just amazed them. I couldn't get away from it, get them away from it, so I thought I definitely needed to bring it and figure out a way to get it into my school so that I could see if this was something that we might be able to purchase. It's not cheap though. All right, the next crew, they're working with robotics, the Ozbot, and the, what do we have, Dot and Dash, and these are things that they work with, and then they also take them into the elementaries and work with the students there. We also have an Evo bot, which is the one that you can code with JavaScript, which is what we're doing in our high school Introduction to Computer Science, so that's kind of neat. In middle school, they've got an iPad there, and they're using the Osmo coding. So we have different opportunities for them to use devices outside of just their one-to-one device. The next picture is the lab that they're using, and we have projector screens that they can hook up to as they are doing their coding and such that. It allows for collaboration. I was lucky enough to join a group with NextTech and Code.org and got to go and visit different businesses that were software and computer science based this summer, and one of the things that they talked about was that they wanted strong soft skills for their employees as they were coming up. So a big component of it is that they're able to communicate, they're able to collaborate, they're able to work in groups, but all of them. So we kind of do clock partners if you're elementary teacher, you know, and we trade up as they do their programming different things. So they're always and continuously changing. Next. Okay, so this is our more traditional computer science courses that we have, and this just started this year, so we're super excited. We have that Tech Tribe option, which is where it all began 4 years ago with that student-led help desk that dreamed of having more opportunities in this small community. So students can join that group in grades 7 through 12, but the next set says CS Discovery courses, grades 5 through 8. So we have some discovery opportunities that we're bringing in. And in grades 5 and 6, they get one class per week where it's about 40 minutes, where they just do some unplugged and plugged activities that have that basis. Grades 7 and 8, they get rotational, and unfortunately it's not all those students. It's not all the students. The ones that are let's see, the ones that have to go to like remediation math or reading, they're actually pulled out. So that's unfortunate. They don't get that exposure in the 7th and 8th grade. It's not as intensive. In the 9th grade is where we start that introduction to computer science, and because we just started it this year, we allowed any student in high school. So I have my Tech Tribe seniors in there, which are they're great. They really are great. Next year, we're adding in an AP Computer Science, and that is, so I am going through NextTech again, and I get free PD, curriculum, and training through them, which is just wonderful. So I'll be teaching the AP Computer Science course. And then we have established a relationship with Ivy Tech, which is our local school, and NKU, because we are located closer to Cincinnati area. And we have students beginning as juniors that can take courses that we do not offer in our school through Ivy Tech, and then will transfer to any schools in the state and NKU into their computer science program so that they will be able to get 2 certifications by the time they graduate high school. So that's pretty neat. Next. And that's it. Any questions?
And you finished pretty close to 5 o'clock on the dot.
I was monitoring it, I'm going to be honest.
Well, thank you to all 3 of you. That was a lot of really great information. And there were no questions, I don't think, throughout the call. And I don't know if people were overwhelmed or just taking it all in. So whichever you were, feel free to connect with any of the presenters or with the Office of eLearning at the Department of Education, and we are happy to make connections between people who already have some great things going on and people who are just getting started. So thank you to you all. And I know somebody asked, I think Maria mentioned sharing the presentation, and somebody asked about that, and I can save it as a Google Doc and send it out to those people who have registered for the webinar today or who have checked in. And also, I have been recording, and knock wood, as long as my technology works as it should, I will have this ready to share on our YouTube channel maybe later this week, but definitely by early to mid next week. So that will be there for anybody who wants to just go back and review what was shared, or if you want to share it with coworkers who may have missed the webinar. So it is 5 o'clock, so I'm going to thank, again, our three presenters, Marcus and Maria and Brandy. Again, such really great information. Thank you guys so much, and hopefully everybody will take this as motivation to dip your toe in coding or delve deeper if you have just been dipping a toe, and use some of the resources that were mentioned. On the screen here are ways to connect with our office. Feel free to use any of those that you, whatever your chosen social media or way to connect would be. We love making connections with those in the field. So thank you again to our presenters, and thank you to all of you who took time out to learn with us today, and we will see you in a future webinar or in a Twitter chat. Thank you, guys.